Good morning, almost, or I guess it's afternoon now. My name is Vincent P. I'm a local real estate appraiser. I live here in Mariposa County, appraise. My partner, Bill Yaley, was my partner up until about a year ago. Some of you may know Bill. We appraise only in Mariposa County and in eastern Madera County. So we do the foothills. We don't go to the valley. We know the area very well. When I was asked to talk about the effect of an appraisal, effect of a fire on an appraisal, I thought it best to talk a little bit about what pre-fire as well as post-fire, because what you do pre-fire will affect what happens post-fire.
The side one.
Oop, too much. Okay. To give you just a brief synopsis of what we look for in an appraisal. If I come to your property, we're going to look at two major things, and then there are other factors as well. The first two major things are the site. The site is the land. It's the ground underneath the building. That is the acreage, and that may be 15 to 30% of the total. There's a fudge factor in there, because if you live on a 100-acre parcel that's going to be, with a small house, the land is going to be a larger percentage of the value than it would be if you had a small parcel with a big house. Okay, then the improvements would be a larger percentage of the total. Does everybody understand that so far? Okay, the improvements are anything you do to the land. You have a bare piece of land, you come in, you put in a well, septic, a house, a road, whatever. Those are the improvements to the property. Additional factors that we look at are the location of the site, the shape of it, the access. But only those, this is, if in terms of pre-fire things, this is the most important factor, the most important point, this next one. Only those improvements, structures, well, septic, that have been completed with county permits are going to be given value. So if you've converted a garage to living space, you've added a barn, you've added to your house, and you didn't get county permits, as an appraiser, I don't give any value to it. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. That's a very important point post-fire, because fire comes through and you lose those things that you've added without permits. I don't know what was there before the fire. I go to the county offices and I say, how large was this house? And they say, oh, it was 1,500 square feet. I appraise it as if there was a 1,500 square foot house, when there may have been a 2,000 square foot house, if you see my point. Okay, so it's very important to do things with permits. As we go out and appraise houses now, most of what we do are for lenders. We don't work for any one lender. We're what's called a fee-based appraiser. We do for many lenders from all over the country. I have to verify the square footage on every appraisal now. That wasn't always the case, so that's something that happens in every situation. Just jump again?
No.
Okay. So the improvements that we look at are the square footage, the age of the house, the room count, the condition and the quality of construction. If the view, and this is where it comes back to the post-fire, what happens if my view gets destroyed? Because I'm looking out onto this, whatever whether it's a forest view or a meadow or whatever, if the view adds a dollar amount, I have to be able to quantify that view. It's very difficult to quantify a view. What I have to do is be able to look at other sales. It all comes down to comparable sales. If you look out at this view and your house next door burns down, or the house next door sells for more than another parcel, and it sells because the view is better, then that's quantifiable. I have to be able to find other comparable sales with a view that sold for more. So if it's a 1,500 square foot house that sells for 50,000 more because it's got a view 50,000 above average, then that's the value of the view. If I can't quantify it, I can't give you value for the view. Okay, it all comes down to that. Okay, adjustments to the value of a property are not automatic. Just because you're looking out onto an area that's burned, even if it's Forest Service land, I can't come in and say, well, the value of your property has been decreased by 20%. I can't do that. Again, it has to be quantifiable with comparable sales. In one recent fire, we had a family come to us and they wanted us to value their property pre and post fire. There were no comparable sales. We have to go back and document it so that I can defend myself in court. If an insurance company or somebody comes in and says, how did you get this number? I have to be able to go back and say, give them a line back, say, that's how I got that. We couldn't find the number. So what we did is we went to the county assessor's office for their opinion, because they assess everybody's property in the county. And we used what they came up with. Okay. if the total value of your property is, say, $250,000, and remember that range of values before where I gave you the range for the land is worth, say, 15 to 30%, and then the balance of the property is worth the rest of it. I just picked 20%. Okay, so just because it was a round number. So if the value of your property is $250,000 and the land is worth $50,000, that's 20%. That's about what it is. With lenders these days, there had been no comparable sales of fire-burned property for them to come up with something. So they had to go to Tuolumne County and a couple of sales in Mariposa County. And they were old. There was nothing recent. Some of these comparable sales that they used were from the 90s. And this was something that happened just a few years ago. So if there isn't any recent data, you go back and you find out whatever data you can get to base it on. Okay, if 100% of the vegetation is destroyed, you still have the land under the house. And the land, what they say is that the land is worth 50% of the total value of the property, and what grows on it is the other 50%. So in this example, if 100% of the vegetation is destroyed, what remains is considered to be at least 50%. That's the land, which is 25% of the $50,000 value, if you're following me. But if 50% of the vegetation is destroyed, then the site value is reduced by 25%. Michael?
Vince, is the vegetation then worth $12,500?
That's the formula, yeah.
So you would say that if your property burns, it burned all the trees, it burned the house, that the value of...
The site value,
the
not
site
the house.
value is 12... The land value is $12,500.
No, that's just the land value, again, the total land is $50,000. If all the vegetation gets taken off, the land is still worth $25,000. Just scarred land is worth $25,000. So the vegetation on top of that is what gets reduced proportionally by the amount of vegetation that gets burned.
And that vegetation is worth $12,500.
In this example, yes. If 50% of it, if 50% of the vegetation was burned, it's going to reduce the site value by the overall value by 25%. So the site value was reduced by 25%. The key thing to remember in this is that this is not a hard, fast rule. Okay, this is a post-fire example. It's not a firm rule. Now that we've had a lot more fires locally, there will be some more comparable sales of burned property or property that may be intact, that looks out on burned areas, and whose values may be affected by those fires. When I called the assessor's office, I said, look, I'm going to come up with this example, and I don't want people to say, this is it. They said they have no other examples at this point. This is what they're still using at this point. It may change. Okay? One thing about real estate and appraisal is that things are always in flux. This is the formula we're using, but we'll see what happens down the road. So as new comparable sales data becomes available, this formula may change. Okay? Again, they're going back to things from Tuolumne County and earlier in Mariposa County. Okay, no automatic change in value. If there is going to be an adjustment, I have to be able to document it with comparable sales data, and when I can't, then I go to the county. Sales prices of other parcels. Now this is where the view comes in. I talked about it briefly earlier. Sales prices of other parcels with a similar view will dictate. So it may not be the parcel next door, it may be a parcel of another part of the county that had a good view, and the sale was, the value was either reduced or increased because of the fire. I say increased because this is the last point is a post-fire example. This is a local example from Foresta. Foresta happens to be in Yosemite National Park. It's a small community. It's been evacuated I don't know how many times this summer. I lived there for 10 years. In Foresta, there was a fire, I think it was in 1990, where it burned up. The Park Service had come in prior to that and tried to get the local owners, the people who own homes there. It's called an inholding. So there's a lot of private land that's completely surrounded by parkland. The Park Service, some of you may know Bill Wendt, he lives here locally here in Midpines. He was the chief ranger at the time. He tried to talk the local homeowners into doing prescribed burning around their homes. Oh God, you get smoke in the house, your clothes reek of smoke. No, we wouldn't do that. We'll be fine. Well, fire came in 1990 and burned, I don't know how many homes, like 30, 40, Paul, do you remember? Just say 40 homes burned to the ground. What the Park Service did was that they said, okay, some of the lots in Forester were 50 by 100 foot lots. Well, when you have to have 100 feet between your well and your septic, you can tell by a 50 by 100 foot lot, there were a lot of marginal well and septic systems up in Forester. So the Park Service, this is beware of the unintended consequences of one of your policies. Had two unintended consequences. They had to move from those 50 by 100 foot lots, and they clustered them all together in another part of Forester. They said, you can rebuild, but now instead of being an island completely surrounded by Park Service land, you're going to have neighbors around you. What they did is two things. Then it took marginal well and septic systems, where now you could share a well among multiple parcels, but you could share a septic system, especially because some of them are seasonal homes. So you could share wells and septics. And it spawned a vacation rental industry in Little Forester, because these people came in, they built homes, it was legal, have a legal well and a legal septic, couldn't stop me from doing a vacation rental business. And now look under VRBO, vacation rental by owner, you'll see, I don't know how many places in Forester. So the Park Service didn't know they were going to do that, but they did. They spawned that industry. The other thing they did was they probably took prices in Forester and shot them through the roof, because some of those houses now look into Yosemite Valley. You can see Half Dome from your living room, or El Capitan. If you can see Half Dome, you can see El Capitan too. So what's that value worth after a fire? But what happens down the road? Because the vegetation is going to grow back, but it's park land. You can't go out and cut it. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Forester. So that's the unintended consequences of. It's not always a bad thing, when a fire comes through. That's sort of an extreme example, but it gives you a pretty good idea. Okay, questions? I went through that pretty quickly. Okay, thank you.
Yep.